Okay. And we'll hit play. So, thank you so much for inviting me. I know it's been a few years since we spoke and the world was an entirely different place, but I feel like we're in a little bit of a better place now, so that's good. Um, and for those of you watching after the fact, thank you for just giving some of your time and attention to this important presentation. So we will kick it off. I'm Titania Jordan. I'm the Chief Parenting Officer and CMO of Bark Technologies. We are a tech company that helps to keep kids safe online and in real life with an app, an in-home physical device that helps to monitor and limit screen time on in-home things like gaming consoles and smart TVs. And then we also have a smartphone, and I'll get into that in a minute. But because of that, because of this footprint, it's close to 7 million children now across the nation. I've had the opportunity to be on a lot of big stages, let's say, whether it's talking to Drew Barrymore, Fox News, Steve Harvey, NBC Bay Area, Squawk Box, you name it. I've been there, and most people would think that would be slightly terrifying. And for some of them, it was at the time, but nothing to date has been scarier than trying to raise my son, who's now 15, in a tech world. There's a reason why there's an emoji over his face, and that's because when he was growing up, before I knew better, I would overshare about him online, or some people call it sharenting or oversharenting. We love our kids so much, and we want to share about them on Facebook and Instagram and all the places, not realizing that we're creating a digital footprint for them that they might not wish to exist and that they don't currently have consent over. And so it's important for us to realize a few things as we get into this, but one of the many things is that the less you can put online about your children, the better, especially when we're talking about public profiles. It's one thing if you have a private account and there's only 10 people that follow you, and that's like your parents and your best friends, right? The risk is very low there. But if you have a public account or a private account with hundreds of followers, it gets riskier and riskier. So before I get into what you need to know and what you can do about what is happening with kids today, I want to show about a 2-minute trailer from this documentary called Childhood 2.0 that really goes deep into what it's like to be a kid today. So I'm going to hit play on this. It's going to take me to YouTube and
A long time ago, families were in communities. They were local, they were small.
I was born in the very depths of the Great Depression. I was put to work carrying wood, carrying water. I knew how to shell peas. I knew how to break beans. We still didn't have electricity.
Have few Instagram
I
accounts.
use Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok.
TikTok and Fortnite. I can just scroll for hours on end. 11 hours a day.
It's been 8, 9.
Maybe like 12.
It's actually been a way that we can keep track of them out there in the real world where things really are scary.
The lives of kids were sort of changing slowly for a while. And then all of a sudden, those kids were able to get on social media, and that's when everything skyrocketed.
The rates at which they're experiencing problems continues to increase.
We also know that the teen suicide rate increased 56%.
Last year alone, we received over 18 million reports of international and domestic online child sexual abuse.
We have traded a false sense of safety and security for actually putting our kids in riskier situations. Called the race to the bottom of the brainstem. So it starts with techniques like pull to refresh.
Every guy has like an addiction to it, but no one talks about it.
It's just faster now, and it's younger.
Well, yeah, like millions of girls go to school all the time. At the beginning of the year, there were multiple suicides before school even started. There were men that wanted to talk to children at all hours of the day and night.
On Snapchat. One thought it'd be a funny idea to talk the other one into committing suicide, and she didn't. She's dead.
After about 6 weeks, we were able to crack this phone. Kids right now are gonna experience the worst of what we're going through.
Do you think your parents know that this happened?
No, my kid won't do that. My kid would never. My kid's school isn't like that. You're wrong.
Because what they see, they feel neurologically compelled to do.
Right now, we're effectively living in an experiment. How is this gonna affect us? We'll find out.
Whew. So that is a 2-minute, 20-second trailer of the documentary Childhood 2.0, which you can watch for free, full documentary on YouTube. I'll share the link a little bit later on, but it's been seen by, gosh, almost 4 million people now just on YouTube alone. So really, really powerful film and helps us to set the tone for what we're talking about today. So to continue down that path, we all know why we're here because we're trying to raise children in a time like no other. No other parent on the history of parenting on this planet has had to do what we're doing. And we can't turn to our parents and ask for advice in the same way they could ask of their parents for typical childhood developmental milestones. I can't call my mom and ask her for advice on when I should let my child have Snapchat or how I should navigate conversations with him about online pornography because she didn't have to deal with this, nor did my grandmother. This slide is an example, a visual representation, back to Bark for a minute, of the why behind Bark. You know, I mentioned we help to protect close to 7 million children across the nation. And honestly, I wish that we didn't have to exist, but we do because so many parents are sitting within an arm's length away from their child. And they're both on their phones or on a digital device that's connected somehow to the internet. And the mom, for example, dads too, but the mom, you know, might be scrolling on Instagram, looking at everybody's best, brightest lives. And I've been there, I've been doing that exact same thing, while your child is perhaps expressing suicidal ideation. And you might not know that. You might not ever know that. And that's why Bark exists, is to be able to analyze those critical elements of a child's digital signal that a parent needs to know about, and then surface them to a parent via text or email and let them know, hey, something's not okay. We've spotted potential issues, and it's important that you take a look at them. So Bark is going to let you know, here's what happened, here's what you need to know about it, and here's how to talk to your child about this issue. So what I'm going to go over right now is some stats. Over 2023, Bark analyzed about 5.6 billion data points across children's devices, accounts, text, email, social media. And here's what we found. And we've done this report year over year for the past few years. And it's pretty eye-opening what tweens, children ages about 8 to 12, and then teens, obviously 13 to 17, are encountering online, whether it's violent subject matter, mental health issues, particularly conversations around depression, bullying. It's heartbreaking. It's truly heartbreaking, the amount of children that are encountering bullying. And bullying today looks so much different than bullying of the past. Children used to be able to go home and escape it. But now, if they have a device with them, they can't escape it. It follows them. It haunts them. It's everywhere, and it's also surfacing in different forms outside of just the direct somebody saying something unkind to you or about you. It can present itself in ways such as fake accounts being created. Somebody might take a screenshot of your child's photo and create a fake account and start posting things, and people think they're saying them when they're not. They're being bullied. They're being doxxed. Also, it can look like exclusion. Sometimes children will create text threads and then kick one child out, and now they're no longer included. So it's a whole new world. Drugs and alcohol, something that has always been around, right, for generations. But today it's different in that the presence of fentanyl has increased dramatically, and it can be very deadly. One pill can kill. And children, instead of going to, that shady street, or that shady part of town to meet in real life with a drug dealer, they can now have drugs delivered to their home just as easily as a pizza, thanks to apps like Snapchat and just the internet in general. Self-harm and suicide is incredibly heartbreaking and on the rise. For those of you who don't know, suicide is the second leading cause of death in children in this nation. And every day at Bark, we're sending between 85 and 100 severe self-harm or suicidal ideation alerts to parents about their kids. And that's severe. That doesn't even take into account the less severe alerts that we send where children are perhaps just saying, I don't know if I want to be here anymore. Um, it's incredibly heartbreaking. Sexual content is obviously super easily accessible with any internet or cellular connection. Such a high rate of children are encountering nudity or content of a sexual nature, and it's in places and spaces that you might not think. Um, even places like Pinterest, and even places that say they don't allow it, it can still be found. Predators. So back in 2020, when I last spoke to this community, we were fresh off of an undercover operation where we as a team created a persona, an 11-year-old girl, and went on to Instagram in particular, and within minutes had grown men reaching out to us for inappropriate reasons. Um, and we did that to show the general public just how quickly this can happen, and that absolutely can happen to your child. Please don't think not my child. And the rate at which predators are trying to reach out to children online is through the roof. It's very, very scary and problematic. Which leads me to this slide of anxiety. I get anxiety every time I spend any time thinking about this, and just how many children are affected by all these issues. And obviously children who are growing up in a world that has a 24/7, 365 news cycle, and they can't escape certain things, whether it's bullying or you name it, where they're feeling like they don't measure up, or they're not enough, or they've fallen into that comparison trap. It's no surprise that they are struggling with anxiety. In fact, I was just speaking before this started, um, but Jonathan Haidt, a social psychologist, recently came out with a book about 1 week ago called The Anxious Generation. And he's making a very strong argument for how we need to come together as a society to reverse these problematic trends. So hopefully you'll have that available to check out, at your local library soon. But it's a really great book. I can't wait to read it. Everything I've seen about it online is leading me to read it ASAP. Disordered eating. That is also something that we can't escape online. Again, when I was growing up, it was a cosmopolitan magazine or a fashion magazine where I would see people that definitely did not look like me wearing clothes I will probably never be able to afford. But I could at least put that magazine away and not be faced with it until the next one came out the next month. Whereas now kids have this exposure in their pockets anytime they want it. And everybody seems to have a filtered, perfect tan six-pack body with super white teeth, and and no acne and no wrinkles and big full lips full of filler, and it's crazy. And not only that, but children have much easier access to figure out how to restrict calories, or which beauty products will give them, their deepest desires in terms of fixes for things that don't need to be fixed. And year over year at Bark, with our annual report, disordered eating is the one statistic that has gotten, I would say, worse year over year out of all of them. So it's something we absolutely need to pay attention to and talk to our children about. So what do we do? We know that things aren't great. We know that our children are struggling, but what do we do about it? Well, it starts with candid conversations and an honest look at ourselves in terms of modeling. You know, what are we doing? How are we showing up for them? And then tech tools. There's a lot of tools that are out there, free and paid, that can help you navigate parenting in a tech world. So, you know, when I was growing up, I would say my mom and I had more candid conversations than my dad and I. I grew up in a divorced household, lovely parents, friends with them still to this day, and they're friends with each other, honestly. But, you know, my dad, I think the only thing he ever said to me about sex was, you're not dating until you're 30, right? And that wasn't very helpful. So we shouldn't necessarily take notes from our parents about how often or how detailed we get about what our children are encountering online. So we've got to be talking with our kids openly, honestly, candidly, more frequently than probably either of us would like to, and earlier than we might think, because they have more access than we ever did. And even if your children don't have any internet access whatsoever, if they do, they go to a public school, do they ride a school bus, do they hang out with other kids who have access or have older siblings? You know, it's really not a matter of if but when they're going to be exposed to mature themes, not just sexual themes, but just mature themes in general, whether it's what's happening in the news today, or violence, or just anything, right? And you need to be their source of wisdom and truth and their safe space. And if they know that they can come to you and you'll remain calm, um, that goes a long way. It's also so important to get your head out of the sand. Please don't think not my kid, or my kid would never. Good kids make bad choices. They're children. The frontal lobes of their brains are not fully formed until they're in their early 20s. They're actually not capable of fully mature, rational thought, right? Physiologically, they're not capable, and that's why they need parents. And that's why we need to be there for them and give them some grace, especially because we've handed them supercomputers way before they're fully ready to manage that responsibility. Um, like I just mentioned, please be a safe place. Model appropriate tech behavior. You know, I'm sure we could all admit to the fact that our smartphones that we own as adults are never too far from us. You know, mine's right here charging. A lot of us feel like we can't even breathe or function without it. It's like another limb. And so what does that convey to our children? Can we leave the home without our smartphone or our smartwatch? Um, can we have dinner with each other without constantly looking at our phone? Maybe we can put it on silent, or turn it over, or turn off notifications. If our children come into our room at night and we have our significant other with us, are we both just scrolling on our phones while the TV is also on? Or are we talking with each other and laughing and loving and hugging? Like, you know what I mean? There's just so much that our children pick up from just watching how we interact with our tech before they even get their own tech. And that's critical. Um, Also on this slide, you see, freak out quietly and give yourself some grace. Nobody loves to hear that their child made a bad choice, or that their child was exposed to bad words or pornography or a predator or fill in the blank, right? It's something that it's none of us wish to happen to our kids. But when it does, because it's really only a matter of if, but when, we've got to take a deep breath. We've got to remain calm and stay level-headed and talk to our kids about, hey, this is maybe how this happened, and this is what we're going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again. And this is what we're going to do to keep you safe physically, mentally, emotionally. It's going to take calm conversations and guidance, just like you guide them through things that they navigate in real life. We've got to do the same thing for their digital lives. Um, Another thing that we've got to talk about with our kids is FOMO, or the fear of missing out. You'll see on the screen here to my left, I'm not sure how it's looking on your end, but that's a picture of snap maps. So within Snapchat, there's something called snap maps that shows your child's live location with anybody that they're connected to. And unless they're on ghost mode, which most kids don't stay on ghost mode. It'd be great if they did. They'd be a lot safer if they did, but they don't. So, for example, we were just on spring break, and so my son could open up Snapchat and see where everybody was hanging out on the beach. And let's say there was a group of his friends that he thought he was friends with, but turns out they're all someplace and they didn't invite him. Boom. All of a sudden, you're feeling left out, and that is one of the worst feelings you could feel, especially when you're, a tween or teen. I have a picture of Taylor Swift up there again because a lot of people got to go to her concert when she came to Atlanta, where we live. I didn't. And I know when I went online and saw everybody posting about going to her concert, I felt FOMO. And I'm an adult and I can deal with my adult choices of not spending a small fortune to go see her perform. But kids, it's a lot different. It's just a whole lot different when everybody is sharing their highlight reel and you're sitting at home watching it all unfold before your eyes at home. Speaking of, highlight reel, there's filtered life versus real life. I don't know how many of you watching this have ever experimented with the filters that come with TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram, but there are certain ones that once you put them over your, aging adult face, you just don't feel very good about yourself anymore. You're like, wow, I cannot unsee that. That looks a lot better than the real me, or it's a perception, right? Just think about if you're, let's say an eighth grade girl and you were to see a filter, and think, oh my goodness, now I need plastic surgery, or now I need filler, or now I need to go to Sephora and get, all this expensive makeup, or fill in the blank. It's just not reality. And it's hurting our children's self-esteem. And our children need confidence more than anything to navigate this landscape. On top of that, if all we are seeing is everybody's filtered perfect lives, we're not seeing reality. We feel bad about ourselves. And another thing to model to our children is if all you're posting about is your filtered life, you're not being honest with your followers or your friends. They're not going to know if you're hurting, if you're sad, if things aren't good. And you're just contributing to that false narrative and not showing the full picture. One thing that's really important that I like to emphasize to children who do have social media is that happiness is an unfollow away. I know that I, again, as an adult in my 40s, have unfollowed some accounts that I just realized made me feel bad about myself. Maybe they weren't doing anything wrong at all, but certain, I would say certain fitness accounts and certain design accounts, I would leave my feed feeling like, wow, I will never look like that, or my house will never look like that. And so I decided to, wish them all the best, but unfollow them for my own sanity and mental health. And our children need to know that they can do the same and feel a lot better. Algorithms are so powerful. If our children don't know, and heck, if adults don't know, these platforms, these apps, especially if they're free, if you haven't paid for them, they're making money off of us. We are the product. And the way they do that is by the time we spend in them. And their goal is to keep us inside of them for as long as possible. There's a reason why my feed looks different than my husband's feed and looks different than my son's feed. We all have different interests. And whether it's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest, you name it, they want to keep us engaged in that app for as long as possible because they can then charge advertisers more money for that time spent in app. And they can record or they can report strong metrics to their shareholders and to their board and get, a pat on the back. So it's so important for our children to know how these platforms work, how these platforms are making money off of them. In fact, some of the top social media platforms over 2023 made, I think, oh, it's either 8 or $11 billion. Either way, it's billions of dollars in revenue off of children alone being on their platforms, when in reality, children aren't even supposed to be on their platforms unless they're 13 years or older. So it's highly problematic. And then the last thing I'll say about algorithms tonight, at least, is that unfortunately, children who are just curious or potentially struggling will stumble across subject matter that they might, be curious about or be struggling with. And then unfortunately, that algorithm, because it isn't taking into account that child's mental or physical health, will show them more of that content, leading children down dark rabbit holes. And it can exacerbate already existing mental and physical health issues. This leads me to sexting. So on this slide, I talk about Georgia sexting laws, but I did a quick search of Minnesota sexting laws, and they are very similar. So if you don't know, sexting is the new first base. Children are being pressured to send nudes. Children are receiving nudes, even against their will, if they have elements like airdrop on to anybody. If they have an iPhone, people will just drop a nude if you're out in public. It's pretty jarring. But it's so important for our children to know that sending or forwarding, or if you receive and save a photo or a video of anybody under the age of 18 to a digital device, that is distribution or possession of CSAM, that's child sexual abuse material, and there are legal consequences for it, and that can actually result in prison time for people under the age of 18, and unfortunately having to register as a sex offender for one mistake. Now, is this happening frequently? In which children are actually being prosecuted for this? No, but there are some states that will make an example of some children, and nobody wants their child to be the example, right? It's heartbreaking. It's so heartbreaking. We hear stories daily of children who sent a nude photo to their boyfriend or girlfriend thinking that's where it would end, and it doesn't end, and it gets around the whole school, and now their mental health is affected, their reputation, their attendance, their grades. It just has a cascading effect, and it's so heartbreaking. And if this does happen, we don't need to shame our children or yell at them, because goodness knows they're already suffering enough. But we do need to help them figure out what to do next. And I have some resources I will share with you soon if that has happened. This just reiterates that this is a problem. And again, this is showing a screenshot of an actual Google article that I found when I Googled Georgia students sexting. But you can do the same thing for Minnesota. And if you bring this up with your child and they're like, there's no way, this isn't going to happen, or, oh my gosh, be quiet, I don't want to talk about that. Some kids don't want to talk about this. One tactic you could utilize to get that conversation started is to say, hey, let's go Google right now, middle school students sexting Minnesota, and just see, are there any news articles about it? And I guarantee you will find some, and it might help your children to pay attention if they aren't listening to you say it. Slang. A lot of children will not just use words, text-based words, to communicate themes that they might not want parents to know about. They'll also use slang. And some particularly interesting slang that we have seen at Bark, for example, is shown here on the slide. And I've got more to share with you towards the end. But one that I think a lot of people are surprised by is the pasta noodle emoji. So a lot of people might think, what? So my kid's interested in having, Italian food for dinner? Cool. Could be. Or noodles sounds like nudes. And so there you go. If you see the pasta noodle emoji on your child's digital communications and you're not having Italian for dinner, might be something you want to take a second look at. So passwords are doorways. Children, especially when they're gifted a device, let's say for the holidays or graduation, they rightfully so think it's theirs, right? They were given a gift. But that's not the best way to go about it, right? Because then they think, well, I'm not going to give you my password. This is mine. This is my private digital thing. And it's just so important for parents to have the passwords to their children's devices and accounts. One example why it's so important, especially if you're trying to communicate that to a child who is reluctant to give you the password, um, is the apartment analogy. You know, there's a reason why my 15-year-old doesn't live on his own yet. He still lives with his dad and I, and he doesn't live on his own with only one key to that apartment. And just like we protect our children in real life with seatbelts and sunscreens, we've got to protect their digital lives as well, and their digital footprint and their digital decisions. And so I'm not advocating for you to go into their devices and accounts every day, all day, and look at every single text, and be a helicopter parent, which, by the way, I used to be, and which, by the way, caveat, if you're worried about your child's physical or mental health, and you do need to dig to see what's going on, by all means do that. But if your child is okay and you're, asking for their phone every single day and saying, okay, let me look through your phone, that can lead to some friction. So now I'm going to talk about screen time, which, there's good screen time and there's bad screen time. If your children are just passively consuming, or not even children, adults, if we're just passively consuming content on a screen all the time and we're not physically moving our bodies, that's a problem, again, for our physical and mental health. But instead, if our children and if we are using technology and screen time to create or compete, in games of strategy, or curate, let's say, Pinterest boards of recipes, or connect with each other authentically, like we're doing right now. We're using Zoom to record this and connect and share. So screen time can be good, but we've got to model appropriate screen time behavior and also model taking breaks. If anybody, child or adult, is sitting in front of a screen for more than 2 hours at a time, it's time to take a break. We've got to move our bodies. We've got to let our eyes and our ears focus on something else, get our heart pumping, get our bodies moving if we're physically able, and just take a break. And that's so important for us to communicate to our children. Like I said, it's about quality over quantity. And this slide here is showing you now a couple tools you can use to help manage screen time. Because as we all know, going to our child to say, hey, screen time's over, doesn't necessarily go over well. And that's because we have been activating the pleasure center of their brain, much like that of an addict when they're engaging in whatever they're addicted to. And so when you take that away, without weaning them off, they are going to experience symptoms of withdrawal, including anger and outbursts. So if you can head that up at the pass with using either Apple Screen Time or Google Family Link, those are free and those come built into Apple or Android devices that you might have in the home. Or you can use Bark on the right-hand side, the very right-hand side of my right hand is an example of what the Bark app looks like and how you can limit or block certain apps and sites, etc., if you'd like. In addition to Apple and Google, your internet service provider, your cellular service provider, your child's gaming console, most pieces of tech now have screen time limits and parental controls that you can utilize absolutely free. So I highly recommend that if you just do one thing after hearing this, you go to Google and Google whatever your child uses the most, plus 2 words, parental controls, and take a look and see at what you can do to make your child's digital encounters a little bit safer and a little bit more manageable. Quick sip of water. So this screen is meant to highlight something that a lot of parents don't know. And it's okay that you don't know that, but after tonight you will know that. So then it's not okay if you still do this now that you've heard it. But essentially, Apple products are not the best products for children. And I say that talking to you from a MacBook Air. wearing an Apple Watch and having an iPhone right by my side. But Apple prioritizes privacy, which is great for adults, and not great for children that need guidance. Not only that, but Apple's screen time features have bugs in them. They've had them for almost 2 years now. The Wall Street Journal and I think TechCrunch and Mashable also reported on it. If you want to fact check me, it's out there. And essentially, even if you set time limits for children on Apple devices, a lot of children can circumvent them because of the bugs, not because you did anything wrong. Also, sometimes parents will set filters to try to prevent children from encountering, explicit or R-rated or certain types of content. And again, because of Apple bugs, the children can still access that content. Again, not because the parent messed up, but because Apple hasn't prioritized fixing the bugs for their most vulnerable users. On top of that, Apple has iCloud, where you can obviously and helpfully back up pictures and photos. And Apple was going to detect and remove CSAM from its iCloud, CSAM being child sexual abuse material. And they decided to not do that. They were going to do that and they decided not to. And I can't think of any reason why it would be okay to keep that sort of content on iCloud when you can remove it. Pedophiles and child abusers do not need privacy. They do not deserve that same right. And so anyway, there's a lot of reasons why I don't believe Apple is a good choice for children or teenagers. And I'm happy to talk more about that offline, but I think it's important for at least you to know before you make that choice. And I know a lot of kids want Apple. It's sleek. They have great branding, but a lot of kids also want a Ferrari. Doesn't mean you get them one for their first car. So you could consider other options. Androids are much safer for children. And there are also certain smartphones that are made, they're built to be a child's first smartphone. Bark makes a first smartphone for a child, but there are other options out there. You don't have to pick Bark, but I would pick literally any other smartphone for a child's first phone besides an iPhone. Additionally, and we can share these resources after the fact, but as you're trying to figure out how to navigate parenting in a tech world, it's really helpful to have a tech contract. If you have older children, I get it. If you try to print out a tech contract and put it on a fridge, they might roll their eyes. But for younger children, when they still like listen to you and care about what you have to say, a tech contract can be really helpful to outline the major responsibility that comes with access to this type of tool. And it can help set boundaries and set guidelines for what we will do and what we won't do with technology, and what are the ramifications if we don't follow these rules. It's a lot easier to, point to something and say, hey, we did not follow this and here's the consequence, so now we're going to abide by this, than to have to try to fight about it in the moment when tensions are high and dopamine and serotonin are spiked because they're addicted. It takes a village. I'm so passionate about this that I started a Facebook group called Parenting in a Tech World a few years ago, and it now has close to 500,000 parents in it, because we need each other. No parent has ever had to parent in a world like this. And any learnings that we can share with each other for how to do it better, uh, you know, I'll take that. I'll take all the help I can get. But this is a great group if you're on Facebook and you want to join. We have a lot of helpful people in there, kind people, great advice. You can even submit questions anonymously if you don't want, to have your identity tied to whatever might be happening with you or your child. So great resource for you. And speaking of resources and books, because hey, we're streaming from a library, I co-authored a book with my dear friend Matt McKee called Parenting in a Tech World. Feel free to check that out. It's a longer version of this presentation, but it's a resource that I wish I had had, 10 years ago, but I didn't. So Matt and I set out to create what we hoped would be a very helpful guide for helping parents parent in a world like this. Another very helpful resource is a site called Protect Young Eyes. You see Chris McKenna there. He created this site. He's a dad of 4. He's a wonderful human being, and he is really on the forefront of helping us to figure out, what we need to know, whether it's the latest game or the latest app or the latest danger or the latest legislation. But his site has also created helpful step-by-step guides for how to implement parental controls on all the different pieces of tech, whether it's iPhones or Chromebooks or PlayStations, you name it. If there's a way to enable parental controls on it, his site has free step-by-step guides and screenshots of how to do that. So highly recommend Protect Young Eyes. Um, Also, these books, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures for older children and Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior for younger children, help parents and caregivers have that difficult, awkward, but important conversation with children about pornography, removing the shame and stigma around it, and just matter of fact, here's what it is, here's what you should do if you come across it, tell a trusted adult, shut the laptop, X out of whatever, what screen you were on. And it's really helpful. And I highly recommend these books. Childhood 2.0. I highly recommend that everybody watch this documentary. We saw that 2-minute preview in the beginning of this presentation, but it's a full hour-and-a-half documentary that you can find free on YouTube, and it's so powerful. Please, please watch it. Please, please share it with anybody who cares about kids. Also at Bark, we have an amazing team of writers. You can subscribe to the Bark blog. We are writing about all the things, whether it's how to stay safe on social media, how to talk to your kids about predators, whatever it is that's happening in the online world, much like Protect Young Eyes, our team is covering it as well. On the sexting slide, I mentioned we would get to a resource, and this is that resource. Take it down. So NCMEC, the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, created a site to help minors get their nude photos and videos taken down off the internet because it was such a problem, and because minors and their parents were reaching out to these social media platforms where this media was being distributed and reporting it, and they weren't taking it down, and they were asking for help, and they were taking months to get back to them, and that is not okay. So thankfully, NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, has this site now called Take It Down, where you can get help you need if, God forbid, your child has been exposed to this, experienced this, a victim of this. It's also important to know that every state in the United States of America has an Internet Crimes Against Children unit. Shortened form of that is ICAC. So if you are worried about your child's online interactions, whether you think they're talking to an adult, or there's photos or videos that have been distributed potentially, or they're being extorted or sextorted or even bullied, you can reach out to your state's Internet Crimes Against Children unit, and they are there to help you. They have seen everything. They have been there. They have helped families just like yours, and there's no shame in reaching out for help. Speaking of bullying, every state, and again, this is showing Georgia because I live in Georgia, but every state, including Minnesota, has bullying laws. And I preface this by saying, hurt people, right? Not every bully needs the police called on them. But on the flip side, if you as an adult has tried to put an end to the bullying that is happening, whether it's by reaching out to the parent of the child who is the bully or going through the school, and it's just not stopping, sometimes you do need to review the laws of your state to see what power you have to make this stop, because it is not okay. Nobody, especially a child, ever needs to be the target or the victim of bullying. And sometimes you do need to resort to legal options to make that stop, because it affects their mental and physical health long term. Back to tools. On this slide, you see Google Family Link, you see Apple Family Sharing, you see Bark, and you see Life 360. So Google, Apple, and Bark help you with screen time and filtering. All 4 of these help you with location tracking. Life 360 on the very right, if you have children who are of driving age, is the only one of these that will offer speed detection and crash detection features. So that's something that is very appealing to parents of older kids. And then Bark is the only one of all of these shown that will proactively send you alerts if and when your child has encountered problematic content or problematic people. And so Bark utilizes advanced content monitoring by analyzing, goodness gracious, I think close to 40 social media platforms now, text, email, YouTube browsing, etc. And then not only sending you the issue of what happened, but also best recommended next steps for how to address. And so you can utilize this through the Bark app or the Bark smartphone, which we have now for kids. This QR code right here is something that I recently launched to help parents move from overwhelmed to empowered. Essentially, I show up, I give a talk, right, like I'm doing right now, and parents sometimes feel like I just ran into their room, yelled fire, and then left and hoped that they maybe called the fire department, right? And I don't like leaving you without next steps. So if you scan this QR code, it's going to take you to a page that's going to ask you for your name and your email address, and I think maybe your cell phone number if you want to receive text or not. But essentially, the only thing you have to fill out if you want is name and email. And if you do that, I will be sending you one email right away with just kind of like a recap of the things that I just talked about, so you can have that saved in your email inbox. And then once a week after that, I'll be sending you tips like, here are the 5 dangers that you didn't know existed in Snapchat, or here's what you need to know about the Kids Online Safety Act that will hopefully get passed, to be nationwide law eventually. So anyway, if you scan that QR code, you're essentially going to be added to my email list that will be like me holding your hand, beyond this moment where you're watching this. And at any time, you can reply to any of those emails, and it comes directly to my inbox if you ever want to talk to me. And obviously, you can unsubscribe at any time because I never want, to be showing up in your inbox and annoying you, because I definitely get too many emails, and I know what that's like. And then if you want to just connect with me personally, my name is Titania Jordan. That QR code, if you scan it, will take you to a website that links easily to my Instagram, my TikTok, my YouTube, all the places and spaces that people are online. I'm there too. And I'm usually creating video content to go over, what you need to know. So feel free to follow and connect with me there as well. I'm going to open the floor for questions. I'm going to stop the recording now, but wherever this lives, if you'll tag me, let's say this lives on Facebook, right? If this video gets uploaded to Facebook, I might not know it. But if somebody will tag my name underneath, if there are questions, I will go to that place and I will answer those questions if you couldn't be here live for this tonight. So thank you for being here. I'm going to stop recording now, but again, tag me wherever this lives and I will answer your questions virtually.
Thank you so much.
Of course, of course.